our queen FRIEREN is absolutely ruthless. And it's just funny as hell unintentionally, which I think is great. And I'm very excited to get more of her and everybody in this cast. I saw a funny thing on, I think it was Twitter or something like that. It was just a shit post basically about the idea that she always has to watch these people now like kind of grow old and die around her as somebody who's, you know, lived for thousands of years and all this time. When she finally meets somebody like Aura, she has like the chance of possibly being able to like make a friend and have somebody around her that she won't have to see pass on like that. She can kind of, you know, build something like a strong relationship with for a really, really extended period of time, especially in comparison to however long it is that she would live, right? But instead, she just tells her to go kill herself. Which I think is great. No, I mean, I get it that like reasons demon and stuff and doesn't want to be friends and whatever else, right? I get that. But at the same exact time, it's still pretty funny. Where we're headed, I don't know, but we're just going to continue onwards from whatever happened. And I'm just very happy and excited to see what more we're going to end up getting. If you like it all, like and subscribe to me. Not to me, for to stick around for the schedule limited content of this particular series. Let's go on to episode 11. Toho show, gonna get blocked at some point, probably right away, to be honest. They've been on me really bad. So just check link in the description or comments for the reaction if you still want to watch it, probably after a few days when they block that section. Yeah, let's go on the episode. Would the statement of a return to form be weird, like wrong in this situation? I think it would just depend, I guess, on how you take it, because I don't mean in a, a negative way, of course, of like we've been like, you know, not doing good and then we're back to like what we are. But I mean, through 10 episodes, have built up this image in my head of how these episodes are going to progress and how things are going to go. And it's more of a return to that form than what we've kind of gone over with the arc that we kind of just went through. So I don't think that statement would be wrong, but it might just come off a little weird, or it depends on how you look at it, I guess. But I'm gonna go with it and say it's more of a return to form, I guess, for the episode. We take it slower, we venture into a lot of different ideas, we do some traveling, we get an insert song just to showcase a lot of time passing as well, and a whole bunch of other stuff that goes down, and it's pretty cool for what it is. It's nothing overly deep, or I wouldn't say overly deep, overly complex, I guess. And it does a great job at kind of doing what it has to do. We get introduced to Craft the monk, who is also an elf. This is something that's actually like extremely interesting, actually, because of the idea that for somebody who we followed and had this understanding of how old she is and how long, you know, she's had to live, and seeing all these people pass before her and all these other things. And we've explored a bunch of different ideas with her. The idea of seeing all these people around her pass, or just kind of time being something that's not as important or something that she has to worry over, such as others. Also behind the idea that people kind of get forgotten over time, and leaving things and lasting memories and stuff are important, but then you can leave things like the statues and everything. But after a certain amount of time, when you start growing up and there start more and more people who don't pass down these stories and these things over time, you slowly will begin to get forgotten about, or thought of less, or less cared for, because people can't kind of comprehend the idea of like how big of an importance you probably had at that exact time, causing, you know, people to be forgotten and things to be lost over time. And a lot of the stuff regarding her master, and then also regarding just her party and stuff, she's probably gonna have to start seeing all this stuff go down as well. So meeting somebody else who has the same sort of perspective and idea on these things is really interesting, I guess, for us to kind of see the idea that nobody probably really expects things from him anymore, right? Because he's outlived literally everybody, thinking the entirety of his kind besides himself was gone, and not having that person who he can kind of have praise him. So having to reach out and find this person, this goddess, in a way that he can kind of look up to or do these things for, so that he ultimately has somebody that he can share that sort of connection with, or have that drive and passion to kind of go out of his way and do something, I think is really a cool way of looking at it. Which is pretty interesting. It's also just interesting to note that he looks at her in more of like it feels like a youthful way, I would say, like a thing where he gives the idea, I mean, and even some of the word choice that he's had, it seems like he's a lot older, and we're under the assumption she's lived for probably a little bit over 1,000 years, would be the assumption, based on the idea that she said that she has lived over 1,000. So I'd assume it's probably closer to it, though. So how long has he lived? Is it like 2? Is it 3? Am I making too big of a jump, or is it like, I don't know? But the idea of these stories and the things that he could go on, and the importance that he may have had at his younger age and his time, and the things that he's kind of ended up going through at some other point, that have been completely lost and forgotten over time, that literally nobody has any clue, and somebody like her actually has no idea either, is really interesting. The importance and the abilities in which that he probably possesses, you know, the things and knowledge that he can kind of pass down over this time, is all things that has basically been lost, because it seems as though he may have kind of isolated himself up here in this mountain, even though he's leaving this. I don't know exactly what it is that he's doing, but it is interesting to see the direction that I guess that could go had we meet back up with him at some other point after our parting here. Would be fun, I guess, to introduce him, and it's also just nice to know there's more of our kind out there. While that was expected, of course, there was going to be. There can be others like FRIEREN, we can assume at this point. It doesn't have to be an elf, but I don't know, like my whole like the whole thing with like elves and just like everybody else in this kind of this world, and even just like a lot of like fantasy stuff like that. Like I'm not very educated, I guess, when it comes to that. So my understanding of would there be other people who live longer? Also, like in a way, is FRIEREN or elves and stuff like immortal kind of creatures? And then the only way that they, and by immortal I mean like they can live as long and nothing literally will happen, but they have to like physically get like killed by somebody else in order for them to die, type of thing. Or is it like they just have extremely long lifespans and they live to like 10,000 or something? Like I don't know that, like the length and the extent of that, which I think is also why I don't know the length and extent of kind of this whole situation. But him also talking about the idea that we will, you know, be in the afterlife and some point with him, or and FRIEREN also at some other point. But it makes me think that it's probably just like an extremely dragged out process, which can be good and bad. But back to the original point, that's more so I don't know the, I guess, capabilities of all the different kinds of species and stuff within this world, right? To the point that I don't understand if there's other people who out there besides elves that have kind of this ability to live as long as they can and can kind of craft themselves to a point that makes them like way stronger than she is. Or maybe there's literally just another elf who's been there alive for 3 times the amount, similar probably to Craft here, who is also a mage and is just extremely fucking strong, but maybe has secluded themselves in a way that she did for like all those years as well, where they're trying to not cause harm or just trying to isolate themselves and do whatever. And we can run into a lot of different interesting people like this that also could be really scary depending on the direction and in the way that they lie morally, I guess, with a lot of stuff. So I'm very interested to see the direction that they pull forward with that. I also like the idea of FRIEREN not being a believer, or that kind of being brought up and taught here, but her also seemingly taking on like such a strong connection or like impact, I guess, that Hyder ended up having on her, and for why she does the things that she does, like sitting here and being able to pray over these bodies and stuff, even though her skepticism of things like afterlife and all this other stuff makes it interesting to see her kind of being joined in these moments, especially figuring out that somebody like Fern is probably very strong on that stuff. It's an interesting thing to see her take that approach. So the necklaces, like all of these stuff that everybody has here, they're all different, right? We had a specific one that was pointed out at some point, but also in previous episodes by our, I don't remember buddy's name, our leader guy, and he had one. He was like, basically, if you show this to people, they'll look at you like a certain way or do certain things. Is everybody like that she kind of gained here, I'm assuming, is from the town, but then all of those are related to their individual self, but maybe like family or something, or their connection to somebody or whatever the situation might be. And I know he said that he lost somebody close to him at some other point as well, and then we end up finding one that I think seems to be similar to his at the end of the day, which is interesting. So maybe he ends up finding that person that he ultimately was looking for. This is such a like freeing moment, I guess, for the most part, especially for him to be able to see the respect and stuff that she puts on them, and it seems as though they have all died in like a pleasant enough way. Like it's still not good, of course, but like a way that didn't seem like they were like tortured over their death here, and FRIEREN being able to kind of kill Aura in the situation allows them themselves to kind of be freed and released from this suffering of kind of being tormented and controlled how they kind of were, which I think is a thing that he kind of recognizes here in this moment as well. Also FRIEREN telling them that she's proud of them and everything, I think is funny as well. We get our fake book, of course, because that's not the natural way that things, or that's just the natural way that things go within this world. And then we have some fun moment with Starks and stuff that makes him pass out. I love the idea of this, one, because Stark's probably just heavy and she doesn't want to have to carry him, but two, because of her past like unwillingness to like kind of touch him or like anything. So being able to just make him float and carry him like that is great. I also love everybody in the town seeing it and kind of freaking out as a result of it. We montage through a whole bunch of rebuilding, which I think is great, and then ultimately leads us to our situation here where we start being told about the Magic Association or whatever it is that they have, and how you need to kind of take a test and get certified and like all this other stuff that they got, all the intricacies of that. And FRIEREN's like, oh, that's such a fucking drag, and it's only been introduced for 50 years, so of course it's not something that she's been, too much on. And then pulls out this old ass artifact, which I don't even know what it begins to indicate, but she has it. Somebody will notice it or recognize it at some point and probably be like, holy shit, and then it'll be great. It's like when like companies like years and years ago, or like restaurants or just whatever, right, gave out like certain things to people, like lifetime passes for like stuff or whatever, and they do these like promos and think that they're good ideas, but then like years and years later, as they become more and more successful, it probably isn't good that you have people like that. But then you have people who actually still have these things, which is fucking crazy, and they pull out these old relics, which I love. Being able to also figure out about the certification and stuff, the idea that FRIEREN has probably not been doing this her entire life, or we know she hasn't been. So it makes me wonder, is this like a legal thing, like her performing these acts of magic in some sort of way that she shouldn't be allowed to do unless she actually has like this license in a way, or the certification, or is it more of like a to keep tabs, or to like, I don't know exactly what the whole purpose of all that is. I wonder though. We end up montaging again through all of this. Everything's too fucking cold, of course, and we have to carry Stark, who ends up fucking passing out from the coldness here. We end up meeting Kraft for the first time, and he is just doing his squats and doing his things. I love how Fern is like, there's a pervert we cannot go in, which I love as well. And then also there's like, why is Stark just being put in the blanket while she's the one in front of the fire? Makes no sense to me, but whatever, you do you. He has his pendant here, which is, very much going to be relevant later on. I love his dream state here, and then when he comes to being awoken, ends up being just wrapped around by him. Also them too sleeping like that is fantastic. A whole bunch of just stuff as we pass time, being able to see the connection that everybody kind of has here. Also the idea that we get to see the praying before the meal and stuff, and more people kind of joining over time, out of our group of 4 here, the ones who don't have that belief at the end of the day ended up joining by the end of it, which I think is really cool to see. And then we get our little talk about him wanting to give this that he carves to Fern, and then we go into our whole backstory, the reasons why he does, and having that purpose, and having that person to kind of praise you for the things that you've done at the end of the day, the people to not forget, and all of that. And then it goes FRIEREN straight into a backstory of the idea of having somebody like Hyder who ended up having this exact same situation, having that person who recited the same thing and just kind of was like, being the one who like praises her for these certain things, and being able to notice these important things such as the mana suppression and stuff. I do wonder if the others noticed it as well, or if it was simply just, they didn't say anything or whatever it is, because he probably noticed it long before he ended up stating this stuff here. But I also love how he's able to just map it out and figure out this whole thing, the child himself of being an orphan and helping all out at this orphanage and all these other kids, right? But then being able to understand that he's going to have a child that's going to become a mage and all this, and he doesn't actually have to be married for all this, but like knowing just like the outcome of his life. Which I think is great to see. Such a beautiful way for them to do this too, of her kind of like looking down sad in this moment, thinking back on this other person who has already passed away, but instead of actually saying that she'll end up passing away, or that he already passed away, he talks about the idea that he's actually in the afterlife now instead, that person that ended up praising her, right? And then him just immediately being like, you'll have that opportunity to see him again then, right? You'll have that opportunity to hear from him, which I think is great, because it makes perfect sense too. It scares me, the idea that we are going towards heaven, right? That's the thing that we're trying to accomplish here, to be able to have this connection and talk with these people again. But lying at that could also be actual death within these characters that have to end up meeting the end of their day, and they end up reaching this heaven, this afterlife as a result. Not the one that I guess they're going there intending to reach, but like the other one, which could be a interesting thing that I guess I never really thought about. But we part our ways here. Just the way that they talk about being able to see each other again could just be talk, because they are so old that of course they're going to have to probably run into each other again. It would only be natural, right? But also we're probably going to run into Buddy again. That would only make too much sense. And then we end off there. Really fun. Like I said, I've returned to form in a way of just kind of slowing it down, and really just going into a little bit more of building out and fleshing out the world and the characters and stuff that we have, and and moves us a bit more forward into some other stuff that'll ultimately end up coming. I'm very excited to see what that is. If you liked it all, to like and subscribe, do me a lot to me. Feel free to check out the other videos in the channel. Leave any comments if this episode series. I'll be back at some point for episode 12. You guys have a good one. Peace.